In a fiery address delivered at a Pan-African summit in Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the interim president of Burkina Faso, issued a clarion call to African nations to join him in a unified quest to dismantle the enduring structures of imperialism and neo-colonialism. The 37-year-old leader, who has emerged as a symbol of resistance against Western dominance since seizing power in a 2022 coup, urged African countries to act swiftly, emphasizing that, the faster we do it, the better for us. Traoré pointed to China and Russia as case studies, highlighting their journeys towards self-governance and their rise as global powers, positioning them prominently on the world map. His speech, steeped in revolutionary rhetoric, seeks to galvanize a continent-wide movement to reclaim sovereignty and foster self-reliance. Traoré's address was a powerful blend of historical reflection, anti-imperialist critique, and a forward-looking vision for Africa's future. Speaking to a packed audience of African leaders, activists, and diaspora representatives, he declared, "Africa cannot continue to be the playground of foreign powers. Our resources, our people, our destiny must be ours to control. The chains of neo-colonialism, economic, political, and cultural, are holding us back. We must break them now, together, or remain puppets forever." Drawing inspiration from Burkina Faso's revolutionary icon Thomas Sankara, Traoré emphasized the urgency of collective action. "The time for begging at the tables of the West is over," he said, echoing sentiments from his 2023 speech at the Russia-Africa Summit. "We have the wealth, the people, the spirit to rise. Look at China and Russia. They fought for their sovereignty, built their systems, and now stand tall among the world's strongest nations. Africa must follow this path." Traoré pointed to China and Russia as exemplars of nations that overcame external domination to achieve self-governance and global influence. He delved into their historical trajectories, arguing that their success offers lessons for African nations seeking to neo-colonial shackles. Traoré highlighted China's transformation from the century of humiliation in the 19th and early 20th centuries, when it was carved up by Western powers in Japan, to its current status as a global economic and political titan. China was once plundered, its people oppressed, its resources looted by foreign powers, he noted. But through the revolution led by the Communist Party in 1949, China reclaimed its destiny. They built an economy that serves their people, not foreign corporations. He pointed to China's focus on self-reliance, industrialization, and state-led development as key to its rise. Under Mao Zedong, China nationalized key industries, invested in education and infrastructure, and prioritized food security and rural development. Traoré noted that China's ability to lift hundreds of millions out of poverty, reducing extreme poverty from 88% in 1981 to less than 2% by 2015, demonstrates the power of centralized planning and sovereignty over resources. China rejected the IMF and World Bank's prescriptions, which keep Africa in debt traps. They built their own systems, and now they lend to the world, he said, referencing China's Belt and Road Initiative, which has funded infrastructure projects across Africa. Traoré also praised China's diplomatic stance, which emphasizes non-interference and partnerships based on mutual benefit. "China does not dictate our policies or station troops to control our lands. They offer partnerships, not puppet strings," he said, contrasting this with the West's history of military and economic interventions in Africa. Turning to Russia, Traoré underscored its historical resilience against Western attempts at domination, from the Napoleonic Wars to the Cold War. He highlighted the Soviet Union's role in supporting African liberation movements, such as those in Angola and South Africa, during the 20th century. "Russia, like Africa, knows the cost of imperialism. They fought to protect their sovereignty and supported our ancestors in their struggles against colonialism," he said, referencing the Soviet Union's aid to anti-colonial fighters. Traoré noted Russia's post-Cold War resurgence under President Vladimir Putin, who has positioned the country as a counterweight to Western hegemony. After the Soviet Union's collapse, Russia was weakened, but they rebuilt their economy, their military, their pride. "Today, they stand as equals to the West, not as subordinates," he said. He cited Russia's control over its vast natural resources, particularly oil and gas, as a model for African nations to emulate. "Burkina Faso's gold, Niger's uranium, Mali's resources, these are our strength. Like Russia, we must control them for our people, not for Paris or Washington." Traoré also praised Russia's strategic alliances, such as those with BRICS nations, which have created alternative economic frameworks outside Western-dominated institutions like the IMF and World Bank. Russia shows us that a multipolar world is possible, where Africa is not a footnote but a leader, he declared. Traoré framed Burkina Faso's recent policies as a practical example of his anti-imperialist vision. Since taking power, his government has expelled French troops, nationalized gold mines previously controlled by Western companies, and rejected IMF and World Bank loans. These moves, he argued, are steps toward economic sovereignty. We have increased our GDP by 17.5% in 2 years, cleared local debts, and built our first gold refinery to process our resources at home, he said, citing Burkina Faso's economic growth from $18.8 billion in 2022 to $22.1 billion in 2024. He also highlighted the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, formed with Mali and Niger, as a regional bloc to counter neo-colonial influence. The AES, which has pivoted toward partnerships with Russia, China, and other non-Western powers, aims to enhance economic and security cooperation. We are not alone. Mali and Niger stand with us. Other nations must join us to build an Africa that answers to its people, not foreign capitals, Traoré urged. Traoré's cultural reforms, such as replacing colonial symbols with locally produced attire and promoting national languages, were presented as part of reclaiming African identity. We cannot be free if we dress, speak, and think like our oppressors. Our culture is our strength, he said, echoing Sankara's emphasis on cultural pride. Despite his popularity, Traoré's call faces significant hurdles. Critics argue that his alignment with Russia and China risks replacing one form of dependency with another. Russia and China are not altruists. They seek resources and influence, just as the West does, said Babacar Ndiaye, a senior fellow at the Timbuktu Institute for Peace Studies. Others, like Chidi Odinkalu, warn that Traoré's authoritarian tendencies, such as cracking down on dissent and media, could undermine his revolutionary credentials. His rhetoric is powerful, but without democratic institutions, this risks becoming a cult of personality, Odinkalu noted. Security remains a pressing challenge. Over 60% of Burkina Faso's territory is outside state control due to a decade-long Islamist insurgency, which has displaced over 2 million people and killed thousands. Traoré's pledge to restore security through civilian militias like the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, VDP, has drawn mixed results, with accusations of human rights abuses by security forces. Economic constraints also loom large. While Traoré has rejected Western financial institutions, Burkina Faso's reliance on the CFA franc, controlled by the French treasury, limits its monetary sovereignty. Transitioning to a new currency or economic system requires resources and expertise that the AES nations currently lack. Traoré's message has reverberated beyond Africa, resonating with the African diaspora in the Caribbean, Americas, and Europe. In Jamaica, Rastafarian communities have held rallies in support of Traoré, seeing him as a modern-day Marcus Garvey. Similar demonstrations in London, Paris, and New York reflect his appeal among those fighting neo-colonialism globally. Traoré speaks to our struggle for dignity and self-determination, whether in Ouagadougou or Kingston, said a Jamaican activist at a Montego Bay rally. On social media, Traoré's image is amplified by AI-generated content and viral campaigns, portraying him as a Pan-African messiah. It's algorithmic populism, emotional, anti-Western, and hyper-shareable, said Burkinabe researcher Aladou Wuram, noting the role of digital platforms in spreading Traoré's message. Traoré's call for African unity against imperialism and neo-colonialism is a bold challenge to the status quo. By invoking China and Russia as models, he seeks to inspire African nations to pursue self-governance and economic independence. His policies in Burkina Faso, nationalizing resources, rejecting Western military presence, and fostering regional alliances, offer a tangible, if fraught, blueprint. Yet, the path forward is fraught with internal and external challenges, from ongoing insurgencies to the risk of new dependencies on non-Western powers. As Traoré concluded his speech, he invoked Che Guevara's revolutionary slogan, "Homeland or death, we will prevail." The audience erupted in applause, but the question remains: can Africa unite under this vision, and will Traoré's leadership spark a continent-wide revolution or falter under the weight of its ambitions? In a continuation of his electrifying address at the Pan-African Summit in Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's interim president, extended a passionate appeal to black people in the diaspora to return to Africa and join the fight against anti-imperialism and neo-colonialism. Traoré pinpointed the brain drain, the mass exodus of African professionals to Western countries, as a critical factor stunting the continent's development. Our doctors, engineers, scientists, and teachers are building Europe and America while Africa starves for their talent, he declared. Come back home. Say no to brain drain. Together, we can rebuild our continent and make it a global power, just as China and Russia have done. His call seeks to reverse decades of talent loss and harness the diaspora's expertise for Africa's renaissance, while framing their return as a rejection of neo-colonial exploitation. Traoré framed brain drain as a deliberate neo-colonial strategy that keeps Africa underdeveloped while bolstering Western economies. They take our gold, our oil, our uranium, and our mines, he said, drawing a parallel between resource extraction and the loss of human capital. He cited stark statistics. According to the African Union, over 70,000 skilled professionals, including 20% of Africa's doctors and 10% of its nurses, leave the continent annually. In 2023, the International Organization for Migration reported that Africa lost 2.5 million skilled workers to Europe and North America between 2010 and 2020, costing the continent an estimated $2 billion annually in lost productivity and training costs. This is not migration, it is theft, Traoré asserted. Western nations offer visas and jobs to our brightest minds, leaving our hospitals without doctors, our schools without teachers, our industries without engineers. They benefit from our talent while we remain dependent on their aid. This is neo-colonialism in its purest form. He argued that the brain drain perpetuates a cycle of underdevelopment, forcing African nations to rely on foreign expertise and loans to fill gaps left by departing professionals. Traoré highlighted specific examples. Nigeria, which trains thousands of doctors annually, sees over 50% of them migrate to the UK and US within 5 years of graduation. In 2024, the UK's National Health Service employed over 5,000 Nigerian doctors, while Nigeria's public hospitals struggled with a doctor-to-patient ratio of 1 to 9,000, far below the World Health Organization's recommended 1 to 600. Similarly, Ghana loses 60% of its medical graduates to Western countries, and Ethiopia's tech sector is depleted as software engineers flock to Silicon Valley. Our professionals are building their AI, their infrastructure, their hospitals. Meanwhile, our people die waiting for care, Traoré said, his voice rising with urgency. Traoré's appeal to the diaspora was both practical and ideological, framing their return as a revolutionary act. You, our brothers and sisters in the diaspora, are Africa's stolen wealth. Your knowledge, your skills, your passion belong here, he said. He urged professionals, doctors, engineers, academics, entrepreneurs, and artists, to bring their expertise back to Africa to drive development and break the chains of dependency. You are not just individuals. You are the architects of our future. Come home and build with us. He pointed to historical examples of diaspora contributions, such as the role of Caribbean intellectuals like Marcus Garvey and Walter Rodney in shaping Pan-Africanism. Garvey called for us to return and build a mighty nation. That call echoes today, Traoré said. He also cited recent success stories. Ethiopian-American engineer Dr. Sasina Haile, who returned to Ethiopia to develop renewable energy solutions, and Nigerian-British entrepreneur Chukwemeka Okorafor, who relocated to Lagos to launch a tech startup that now employs 200 local engineers. These are not isolated cases, they are proof of what's possible when our talent stays home, he said. Traoré proposed concrete incentives to attract returnees, drawing on Burkina Faso's recent policies. His government has launched a Return and Rebuild initiative, offering tax breaks, land grants, and startup funding for diaspora professionals who relocate. In 2024, Burkina Faso resettled 150 diaspora engineers and doctors, who contributed to building local clinics and solar-powered irrigation systems. We don't need charity, we need your skills. We will make it worth your while to come home, he promised, announcing plans to expand the program across the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, which includes Mali and Niger. Tying his call to the earlier examples of China and Russia, Traoré argued that their success as global powers stemmed from retaining and nurturing homegrown talent. China did not become a tech giant by letting its engineers flee to the West. Russia did not rebuild its military and economy by exporting its scientists, he said. He noted that China's 1,000 Talents Plan, launched in 2008, successfully lured back over 7,000 Chinese scientists and engineers from abroad by offering competitive salaries, research funding, and national pride. By 2020, China's investment in STEM education and domestic innovation had produced 4.7 million engineers annually, fueling its rise as a tech superpower. Similarly, Russia's post-Soviet recovery involved policies to retain talent, such as state-funded research institutes and partnerships with private industries. Traoré highlighted Russia's ability to maintain a robust defense industry, producing advanced weaponry like the S-400 missile system, as evidence of prioritizing local expertise. They invested in their people, kept them home, and built systems that rival the West. Africa must do the same, he urged. Traoré contrasted this with Africa's reality, where colonial-era education systems often prepare students for jobs abroad rather than local needs. Our universities teach in French and English, not our languages. They train us to serve foreign systems, not to innovate for Africa, he said. He advocated for curriculum reforms to focus on African challenges, agriculture, renewable energy, and healthcare, and proposed regional centers of excellence to train and retain professionals. Burkina Faso's newly established Sankara Institute of Technology, which trains engineers in solar and agrotech, was cited as a step toward this vision. Traoré acknowledged the challenges facing diaspora returnees, including political instability, limited infrastructure, and lower salaries compared to Western countries. We know it's not easy to leave comfortable lives abroad. But comfort is not freedom, he said. He addressed security concerns, noting that Burkina Faso's government is intensifying efforts to combat the Islamist insurgency that controls over 60% of its territory. We are fighting for stability so you can return to a safe Africa, he assured, citing recent military gains in the Sahel, supported by Russian training and equipment. He also tackled economic barriers, criticizing the West's visa traps that lure African professionals with promises of wealth but often result in exploitation. You are doctors driving taxis in London, engineers cleaning offices in New York. Is that the dream they sold you? He asked, citing studies showing that 30% of African professionals in the West work in jobs below their qualifications. Traoré argued that returning to Africa offers not just professional fulfillment but also the chance to shape history. Here, you are not a minority struggling for scraps. You are kings and queens building a legacy. Traoré's speech was laden with emotional resonance, invoking shared history and identity. The slave ships took our ancestors, but the brain drain takes our future. Come back to your roots, your soil, your people, he said. He referenced cultural movements like Afrobeats and Nollywood, which have gained global influence through diaspora contributions but thrive when rooted in Africa. Burna Boy sings for the world, but his heart beats in Lagos. Be like him, bring your gifts home. He also addressed the psychological toll of living in the West, where systemic racism often marginalizes black professionals. In Europe and America, you are tolerated, not celebrated. In Africa, you are family, he said, drawing cheers from the crowd. Social media amplified his message, with hashtags like #ComeBackToAfrica and #NoMoreBrainDrain trending across platforms like X, where diaspora youth shared stories of discrimination abroad and aspirations to return. Traoré's call has sparked debate across Africa and beyond. In Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu praised the idea but urged caution, citing the need for infrastructure to absorb returnees. In contrast, Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo endorsed the call, announcing a diaspora investment fund to support returnee entrepreneurs. Caribbean leaders, such as Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness, expressed interest in collaborating with African nations to facilitate diaspora engagement, building on existing Year of Return initiatives. However, skeptics warn of practical challenges. Returning sounds noble, but Africa's economies must create jobs for millions of local youth first, said Kenyan economist Wanjiku Mwangi. Others question Traoré's reliance on authoritarian models like China and Russia, fearing that centralized control could stifle innovation. We need talent, but we also need freedom for that talent to thrive, said a diaspora academic in Paris. who requested anonymity. Traoré's vision also faces resistance from Western nations, which rely on African professionals to address labor shortages. In 2024, the UK and Canada introduced fast-track visas to attract African nurses and tech workers, a move Traoré called a new scramble for Africa's minds. He urged African governments to counter this with policies that make staying or returning more attractive than migrating. Traoré's call to the diaspora is a bold extension of his anti-imperialist agenda, tying the fight against brain drain to the broader struggle for African sovereignty. By invoking the success of China and Russia in retaining talent, he offers a roadmap for Africa to reclaim its human capital and build self-reliant systems. His policies in Burkina Faso, from economic incentives to cultural reforms, aim to make return viable, while his emotional appeal seeks to ignite a sense of duty among the diaspora. As the summit drew to a close, Traoré stood before a banner reading "Africa for Africans," his voice unwavering. "Our ancestors survived the Middle Passage. Our generation must survive the brain drain. Come home, build home, stay home. The world will respect us when we respect ourselves." The crowd's roar signaled the resonance of his message, but the path to realizing this vision remains complex and uncharted.